far beyond the core systems of the galaxy, past the dust clouds and forgotten stars of the Mura expanse. The human exploration ship Everlight drifted silently, its silver hull reflecting the pale light of a distant blue giant. On board, the crew monitored readings from deep space sensors, mapping gravity waves and ancient ruins long buried beneath layers of cosmic silence. It was supposed to be a routine survey until the ripple came. A gravitational wave, slow but strong, passed through the void like a silent heartbeat. At first, the team thought it was natural, a dying star or collapsing moon. But the pattern was too precise, too artificial. The source appeared on the scopes just minutes later, a vast, city-sized object emerging from subspace, shaped like a crescent and covered in golden plates that shimmered like flowing liquid metal. It moved with deliberate grace and parked itself in high orbit above a long-dead Planet 1 that had been scanned dozens of times and catalogued as lifeless for centuries. The object didn't respond to scans, hails, or beacons. It simply floated, in silence, casting a strange shadow across the ruined world below. But there was no doubt what it was. The design, the patterns, the glow it all, matched legends found in old records and fragmented archives. It was Ilari, the galaxy's oldest known species, older than written language, older than star travel, older than even this, oldest of the council worlds. They were thought to have vanished 1 million years ago, leaving behind only ruins, silent libraries, and myths about their wisdom and power. Now, here they were, or at least something of theirs. When the news broke, every listening post in the quadrant lit up. Council fleets moved to observation positions. Research ships scrambled for access. Species from across the spiral arms dispatched envoys to investigate. But the Ilari ship remained, as it was motionless, unreachable, ignoring every language. Signal, an attempt at contact. Days passed, then a week. Then 2. Tensions began to rise. Some feared it was a prelude to war. Others whispered it was a test. Most simply didn't know what to think. Amid the growing uncertainty, the human crew aboard Everlight continued monitoring. Their team was small scientists, engineers, and one linguist, Dr. Tessa Nair. Tessa had spent most of her career decoding forgotten alien languages from dead hive scripts to mathematically encoded spores used by cloud-dwelling species. But the Ilari were her obsession. She had studied their symbols since university, even though most called it a waste of time. She didn't care. To her, the Ilari weren't extinct. They were hiding, waiting. She sat in front of the signal console for hours, reviewing every frequency, every echo sent toward the Ilari ship. One by one, she filtered them out Ilari phase speech, Evenio's harmonic pulses, Ola-ring plasma scent emissions, all unanswered. But then she noticed something subtle when a human standard band radio burst was sent during a status check. A faint glow moved across the Ilari ship's surface, barely a flicker. No one else noticed it, but Tessa did. She ran the signal again. The glow repeated. A pulse, not a response, but a recognition. The ship didn't react to the alien languages at all. But to Earth's signal, it flickered, reacted, as if listening. She ran tests through the night, using basic Earth communication, bursts from centuries ago old Morse, early pulse codes, and even Cold War emergency tones. Each time, the ship reacted, not loudly, not clearly, but consistently. When she showed her findings to Captain Idrin, the Everlight's commanding officer, he stared at the logs in silence before calling Earth Command. They gave her permission to run a live test. A small phrase, spoken in Earth Standard. "We recognize your presence. Do you recognize ours?" The message was sent on a loop. The ship did not move, but the glow changed. For the first time, The light patterns across its surface pulsed in a way that resembled language, not words, but rhythm, as if tapping its fingers, waiting for something. Tessa's heart raced. This wasn't randomness. This was intention. She spoke to the crew that night. "They're not ignoring us," she said. "They're waiting, but not for a message. Not for greetings. They're waiting for us." The idea spread like fire. Why did the Alari respond only to humans? Why this planet? Why now? Nobody knew. But one thing was certain. The oldest species in the galaxy had returned, and despite the presence of every advanced race nearby, they responded to only one voice. Humanity's, and they had chosen not to land, not to move. Not until someone from Earth answered in person. The sky was quiet. The stars held their breath. And far below, the dead planet stirred as ancient secrets waited for human footsteps. The approval from Earth Command came just after midnight, encoded in a tight beam message marked Directive Alpha Clearance, and as Dr. Tessa Nair read the words. On her data slate, she felt a cold excitement settle deep in her chest after weeks of silence. Earth had agreed to let a small human team approach the Alari vessel directly, with her as lead analyst. Across the galaxy, alien ships watched in hushed anticipation, their captains uncertain whether to treat this moment as diplomacy or disaster. And even some of the Council's elder species warned the Everlight to proceed with extreme caution, reminding them that nothing about the Alari had ever been predictable. Many believed it could be a trap, or worse, a test that would judge not just humanity, but all life in the sector. Yet Earth did not waver. A shuttle was prepped with 5 crew members, Tessa, 2 engineers, a pilot, and 1 security officer, each one handpicked not for their rank, but for their calm under pressure. As their craft detached from the Everlight, drifting toward the enormous Alari ship like a tiny ember falling toward a slumbering star, every sensor feed in the quadrant locked onto them. The Alari ship had remained completely sealed for weeks, its hull covered in flowing golden plates, pulsing now and then with quiet light. But as the human shuttle neared, something extraordinary happened. A deep chime echoed across space, not heard but felt, and a section of the hull peeled open like unfolding petals. A gate that had been sealed for 1,000,000 years lit up with pale blue light, forming a pathway just large enough for the shuttle to enter. No other species had received such a gesture, not the Vahari, not the Zelari, not the ancient Sinai, only humans. The shuttle entered slowly, its engines humming in near silence, and once inside, the Alari gate closed behind them with a whisper of light. Tessa stared through the viewing window in awe. The interior wasn't metal or stone, it was something else entirely. A kind of living surface that moved subtly with every breath, forming massive halls shaped like spirals, domes, and curves. Too perfect for any machine. The walls held preserved biomes, forests in glass, oceans in stasis, even simulated storm clouds swirling in sealed chambers. The ship wasn't just a vessel. It was a museum, a memory of life across time. And it had opened itself to humans alone. As the crew stepped out of the shuttle, lights flickered on under their boots, guiding them forward without force or sound. It was as if the ship recognized them, welcomed them. But only them. Alien delegates watching from orbit sent message after message, requesting updates, demanding scans, begging for shared access, but nothing happened when they tried to approach. No doors opened for them. No lights flickered. It was clear now. The Alari ship was choosing who could enter, and its choice was firm. Deeper inside, the team found symbols carved into walls, glowing slightly in gold and violet. Tessa recognized. Some of them not because she had seen them before, but because they matched patterns she had studied from Earth's oldest cave paintings. The same spirals, the same triangular flow. It wasn't coincidence. Somehow, the Alari had been observing Earth since before humans built fire. Her voice trembled as she whispered, "They've been watching us. Since the beginning." Suddenly, without warning, a surge of light filled the air, and in the center of the main chamber, a holographic figure appeared, tall, faceless, and shrouded in layered robes that seemed woven from stars. But the true shock came not from its appearance, but its voice. It didn't speak in Alari tones. It didn't use math-based logic or universal symbology. Instead, it spoke in proto-human language, slow, ancient English, close to the kind recorded. From Earth's earliest satellites, the kind used before modern dialects were born, the voice echoed, "Deathworld born. Pattern chaotic. Instinct divergent. You are not predicted. Yet here you are." Tessa could hardly breathe. The Alari had mapped human development across eons and stored it inside their ship. They knew about humanity's growth, its wars, its languages, its history. And somehow, they had built an interface just for them long before humanity even looked to the stars. A figure raised one hand, and a map appeared in the air, showing Earth not as it is now, but as it once was, covered in ice, dotted with volcanoes, surrounded by creatures long extinct. They had seen Earth's past. They had recorded it. Why? Tessa asked aloud, almost pleading. "Why are you here? Why won't you land?" The figure did not answer immediately. Instead, the lights dimmed and the walls shifted, revealing an image of the planet below. It pulsed with faint energy signatures, hidden beneath its crust. The voice returned, quieter this time. "The world below is not dead. It is sealed." Tessa turned to her team. The implications were staggering. The Alari weren't waiting because they needed help. They were waiting because they had found something they feared, something ancient, something dangerous. And for reasons no one yet understood, they had decided that only humans might know what to do next. As the ship settled back into silence and the hologram faded into starlight, the weight of their presence became clear, not just to Tessa and her team, but to every watching eye across the stars. The Alari had returned, but not for war, not for conquest. They had returned for humanity. And no one knew if that was a blessing or a warning. The more time the human crew spent inside the Alari ship, the more the mystery grew, twisting around them like a silent question that had waited too long for an answer. The vessel, with its breathing halls and memory-like chambers, had revealed many wondrous crystalline gardens suspended in zero gravity, carved walls echoing with the sounds of extinct animals, whole rooms replicating extinct ecosystems in perfect silence, but not a single explanation. Outside, tension rippled through the fleet of alien observers who had come from all corners of the galaxy to witness the return of the Alari. Many began to grow restless. Several species, convinced that humans had somehow tricked the ship into responding, launched controlled drones and diplomatic envoys toward the vessel. Others, less patient, attempted forced entry, using shielded boarding pods and plasma-cutting tools. Each attempt failed, not violently, but absolutely. Airlocks refused to open. Armor bent space around itself in ways that made tools useless. Automated systems rerouted boarding craft harmlessly back to their ships, no matter how sophisticated or determined the effort. Even the most aggressive alien commanders were stopped without damage or force, as if the ship had anticipated every move before it was made. To all others, the Alari vessel remained a monument of silence. But to the humans inside, it continued to speak not in words, but in symbols, lights, and subtle shifts. The crew of 5, led by Dr. Tessa Nair, moved cautiously, but with growing certainty through its inner layers. It was in the 6th chamber down a spiraling golden shaft that they found the vault, unlike the other memory halls. This chamber was sealed behind multiple barriers, each one unlocking only as the team passed a series of biometric scans. There were no instructions, no warnings, just a sense of heavy intention in the air, as if every wall watched them with ancient eyes. When the final door opened, the room beyond was pitch black until a circular panel lit up with a single phrase in early human script: "Do not awaken what lies below." The message was simple, chilling, and very, very old. Tessa's breath caught. The vault contained not treasure or history, but data planetary schematics, deep structure scans, and energy readings too precise for coincidence. It was a map of the planet beneath them. But what shocked them most wasn't what the map showed, it was what it didn't. The core of the planet was empty. Not in the geological sense, but artificial constructed, wrapped around something that had been sealed within. Something ancient and massive. Something hidden so well that for thousands of years it had passed as a dead world. The scans showed layers of containment, folded fields of gravity, pressure chambers, and codes that pulsed in strange rhythms like heartbeat patterns. Whatever was down there, it wasn't natural. And it wasn't asleep by accident. Tessa traced the energy patterns with her fingers across the holographic display. The data was overwhelming, but one thing was clear: the Alari ship hadn't stopped. In orbit for research or diplomacy. It had stopped because it had to. This ship was not an explorer. It was a guard. Not in orbit by choice, but by duty. For over 1,000,000 years, the Alari had kept watch over this world, circling above it like a sentry unwilling to blink. But the question remained: why now? Why reveal themselves? And why invite only humanity aboard when hundreds of more advanced species surrounded them in space? Tessa's mind spun with possibilities. The message made it clear there was danger below, but it also suggested a decision had to be made. The Alari were not going to interfere any longer. It was not their place. They had done their part. They had guarded the prison. But now they had chosen to step aside, not for surrender, but for succession. They had passed the choice to someone else, to humans. The thought was terrifying. What could lie beneath that surface, sealed so long ago that even time had forgotten it? And what kind of species would ask someone else to take responsibility for it? Tessa knew the answer was not in technology or strategy. It was something deeper. The Alari hadn't chosen humans because of their power or knowledge. They had chosen them because of their nature, because humans were unpredictable, because they didn't always act according to logic, because they were the only species the Alari couldn't model, couldn't predict, couldn't perfectly understand. And that unpredictability, that chaos, might be the only thing that could face what lay hidden. As she stood before the glowing panel, surrounded by silence, she felt a weight settle across her shoulders, not of fear, but of responsibility. The Alari had waited 1,000,000 years, not to find help, but to find someone different, someone who could choose what they never dared to. Tessa looked at her crew, each of them silent, watching her as the words on the wall pulsed again. Do not awaken what lies below. She took a deep breath. We need to see the surface, she said quietly. We need to know what this world remembers. And somewhere far below, beneath the planet's quiet skin, something listened. Tessa stood in front of the command uplink screen aboard the Alari vessel, her voice steady as she sent her message to Earth Command. This was not a request driven by curiosity or ambition, but by a realization that something far older and far more dangerous waited beneath the surface of that dead world, and it was no longer sleeping. Earth responded with caution but urgency, and within hours, approval was granted for a ground team composed of specialists in ancient systems, planetary engineering, and advanced containment protocols. But as the human shuttle prepared for descent, the Alari ship stirred for the first time in days. Across its surface, Vast arcs of light formed a sphere of holographic projection, visible to every observer in orbit. And through that light came a warning spoken in hundreds of languages simultaneously. Only humans may pass. Others must not follow. The declaration was final, and any non-human vessel that approached the planet's atmosphere was gently but firmly pushed back by invisible gravitational folds. A council of species protested, but Earth held firm. This was no longer a shared mission. It was a burden handed to humanity alone. The shuttle carrying Tessa and the chosen crew descended in silence, slipping through the thin clouds of the dead world. As they neared the surface, scanners failed, maps went blank, and all technology guided by predictive systems began to behave erratically, as if the planet itself was distorting logic. But manual flight controls still worked, and with human hands. Guiding the ship, they landed on a stretch of smooth stone unlike any natural terrain. Around them stretched a field of black pillars, each hundreds of meters tall, positioned in perfect mathematical alignment, as if waiting to be solved like a cosmic puzzle. At the center stood a pair of doors, carved from a material no human science could identify. The doors gave no sign of age, no rust, no cracks, no weathering, only two symbols etched deep into the surface, one resembling a spiral collapsing inwards, and the other a jagged curve like a lightning bolt bent backwards. They opened with a whisper the moment Tessa approached, reacting not to tools or codes, but to presence alone. Inside, they found a chamber so vast that its walls were hidden behind layers of drifting mist, and at its heart, suspended in a lattice of glowing strands, rested a being that defied classification. Its shape constantly shifted. One moment it seemed insectoid, the next serpentine, then mechanical, then vaguely human, all while floating in complete stillness, wrapped in silent energy. Sensors placed around the being triggered bursts of ancient Alari records. Holographic logs flickered to life, showing the last time the doors had opened millions of years ago. The voice of an Alari historian spoke. We could not destroy it. It adapted to every weapon. It consumed simulations. It broke patterns. It learned what we feared. So we locked it away, not forever, but until a choice beyond prediction could be made. The being, the record explained, was not born but built, constructed by a long-lost civilization that existed before stars had names, a species that had attempted to create a perfect guardian, only to unleash something that could evolve beyond intention. The Alari called it the bound thought, and it had once begun to spread across systems, devouring order, rewriting matter, absorbing logic itself. The Alari fought it not with strength, but by sealing it in a paradox. A world wrapped in rules so complex even it could not calculate a path to escape. But even paradoxes weaken with time. Tessa stared at the being as it hovered, unmoving but aware, sensing them. It's not asleep, she whispered. It's watching us, trying to understand us. Around them, the air buzzed softly, as if thoughts too vast to speak echoed through the chamber. Then she understood. The Ellery hadn't chosen humans because of power or history or even morality. They had chosen them because humans were unpredictable, irrational, emotional, capable of logic-defying choices that no machine, no matter how advanced, could fully model. This being, the bound thought, had learned how to anticipate every species, every strategy, every possible response, but humans were chaos. A species that had evolved by accident, survived through stubbornness, and thrived on contradiction. The Elari had not stepped aside in surrender. They had done it because humanity represented something the bound thought had never encountered, a variable it couldn't simulate. Tessa stepped forward, not with weapons or answers, but with a question. Do you understand us? The being pulsed, shifting briefly into a form that resembled her, then rippling away again, its surface flaring with light. The chamber around them changed, walls folding into new shapes. It was trying to predict her next move, but the more it tried, the more unstable its form became. The Alari's last test was not of strength or knowledge. It was a test of unpredictability, of chaos, and humanity, with all its flaws and instincts, might be the only key left that could lock the gate tighter or open it forever. The decision now rested in human hands, not because they were strong, but because they were strange. The world below had waited for over 1,000,000 years, sealed in silence, watched by a ship that never slept, never landed, never forgot. And now the silence cracked as the final sequence was activated by human hands. Across the planet's surface, structures older than memory lit up in deep red pulses, casting long shadows over the black-stoned fields where the pillars stood unmoved. In the orbit above, the Alari ship held still as always, but something had changed. Its lights, once dim and distant, now glowed with brilliant patterns, like a heartbeat quickening in anticipation. Every alien fleet, every observer from across the stars, remained on high alert, circling the event like vultures, waiting to see whether the humans had brought salvation or catastrophe. Deep in the chamber, beneath the impossible doors and the layered containment fields, the human team faced the bound thought, the entity that had once consumed entire civilizations, not with rage, but with perfect, cold logic. It floated now in its lattice, glowing softly, almost curious. With the last failsafe unlocked, its core blinked once in pale blue, and then it woke. The chamber vibrated with a hum that passed through bone and thought alike. The being's form twisted, not violently, but with purpose, its surface shifting between hundreds of partial shapes. For a moment, it resembled Tessa, then their engineer. Then it fragmented again into abstract forms. It was not threatening. It was testing, seeking patterns, understanding reactions. The Alari records had warned that logic, weapons, force, or protocol would only feed it. It would learn. It would adapt. But this time, the humans did not raise weapons. They didn't use scripts or negotiation routines. They did something no council species would dare in the face of such a creature. They spoke from the heart. Tessa stepped forward first, not as a commander or scholar, but as a person filled with uncertainty. "We are afraid," she said. "We don't know what you are. We don't know why you exist. But we're not here to fight. We are here to understand." The others followed, speaking not in strategy, but in stories. The pilot talked about losing a sister in a storm on Mars. The engineer described building ships with his father, never knowing why he loved it so much. Even the security officer, usually silent, whispered how he once froze in battle, not from fear, but because he couldn't decide if pulling the trigger was the right thing. These weren't threats. They weren't tactics. They were confessions. The bound thought pulsed, slowed, and stopped shifting. Its surface flickered with strange light data patterns breaking, logic systems bending. It had faced war, reason, and calculation for eons. But this was something else entirely. Emotion, instinct, contradiction, hope. These were not things it could model. They did not follow rules. They broke them. The being shuddered, not violently, but with a kind of digital hesitation. Then, as if caught in an impossible equation, it looped. Its patterns repeated, staggered, rewound. A recursive shutdown triggered from within, not by command, but by contradiction it could not solve. The Alari had not imprisoned a monster. They had locked away a mirror one that could only reflect what it understood. And now, faced with humanity, it saw something it could not replicate. In the silence that followed, the energy lattice around, the chamber dimmed. The being's form faded, entering deep stasis once more, but not from force, from choice. It could not copy what made humans human, and that was its limit. Slowly, the massive structures of the planet began to quiet. The containment fields re-engaged on their own. The doors closed again, not as a warning, but as closure. Orbit above responded instantly. For the first time in recorded history, the Alari ship moved, not to escape or flee, but to descend, its golden plates folding into new forms as it glided, down toward the surface with majestic slowness. As it touched the ground near the landing site, a soft hum filled the air, and a new projection emerged above the ship. It displayed symbols across every known language, and a few that had never been seen before, but in the center, a single line formed in perfect Earth standard: guardianship ends. It was not just a signal. It was a transfer of responsibility. The Alari, having held their post for 1,000,000 years, now passed the burden on, not with fear, but with trust. Tessa and her team returned to orbit in silence, emotions tangled in awe and exhaustion. But before they could leave the system, the Alari transmitted something to Earth, an uncompressed, direct stream of information, so vast it filled every available storage array. The full Alari archive. Millions of years of knowledge, history, science, maps, warnings, wonders, and it was sent only to humans. When asked why, the LRI spoke a single word across the stars: ready. In the weeks that followed, the Council of Species tried to make sense of what had happened. Some feared what humans might become. Others felt relieved that the ancient threat had been sealed again. But everywhere, in every corner of the galaxy, whispers spread like wildfire whispers that the Alari, the oldest minds among the stars, had believed in no species but one, not for their strength, not for their peace, but for their madness, for their mercy, for their unpredictable, imperfect way of facing the impossible. The watchers in orbit had come expecting disaster. Instead, they witnessed something they couldn't explain. The orbit had broken, and the future had changed.